Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rob Austin-Goodall. I'll be moderating this webinar, Strategic and Creative Thinking Models for Engineers, delivered by my colleague Phil. We're going to kick off in about 30 seconds or so when I hand over to Phil. In the meantime, I'd just like to welcome you all for joining and attending. We've got well over 300 people already on board, and we're expecting a few more as the time sort of clicks on. For those of you who haven't used the platform before, or those of you who haven't and forgotten, on the right-hand side, you'll see a tab with a arrow on it. Click on that. That will then give you a menu selection to select the attendee chat. The attendee chat box will then appear. Please use this to communicate if you have any questions or any problems. A number of you have done that already, and thank you very much for that, introducing yourself. And the weather seems sunny with showers in Dublin at the moment. Thank you for that, Bob. But that's brilliant. And I will now hand over to Phil to deliver this excellent seminar.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to wherever you are joining from, wherever you are in the world. I was taking notes in the chat as people were connecting and introducing and saying hello. So I wrote down Iraq, Hong Kong, Portugal, India, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, the Canary Islands, Turkey, Belfast and Dublin, Muscat, and then I must say a special hello to Jack from Pontefract, who's just up the road from me. So welcome everyone, and Jack. So I'm Phil. I'll be your presenter. I recognise for some of you that there is some echo on the line. Same for me, but let's persevere and feel free to use the chat to kind of point out if there's anything that you need me to repeat. Just so that you can understand a little bit more about who I am and have a nice picture of me in your mind as I speak. I'm Phil Slater. I'm a learning and development professional. I've been doing this for about 25 years, teaching and facilitating leadership, soft skills, change management, communication programs across many industries, including engineering and all around the world. So many of the countries that you're joining us from today, I've had the pleasure of visiting and working in. So that's me, and feel free to use the chat to tell us a little bit more about who you are. We're going to cover a number of things today. It's not a neuroscience presentation. However, we're going to set up some of our discussion around thinking types by just introducing you to a little bit about how the brain works, where our different thoughts come, and how we can channel them when we're thinking about how to approach strategic challenges, on how we can bring in elements of creativity to whatever it is we're trying to provide. And as Rob said, and thank you to Rob for helping and moderating, and also to Kirsty, who's in the background looking after all the functionality and all that, man. But towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So you will have opportunities to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. If any questions come out as we're going through this, feel free to put them in chat. If I get an opportunity, I'll address them. And from time to time, Rob might point me in the right direction of a question that's been asked. But if not, we will have some time at the end. So I'm going to be speaking for around about 35, 40 minutes. And then that will provide us with some time at the end to ask questions. So you can get involved. Use the chat box, to ask questions or to make any comments, make sure that you talk to one another, introduce to one another, and then at the end of the webinar, I'm sure there'll be a few messages and recognise for yourselves that there is an opportunity for you to get in touch with us or IMechE and talk to about how we can support any of your individual or collective development needs. So just to let you know, with the magic of technology, my slides are working very slowly today. So if it sounds like I'm pausing, it's because I'm waiting for the slide to catch up with my brain, which is a good way of introducing our first section. So as I said, it's not a neuroscience course, but to set this up, I wanted to talk a little bit about certain elements of our brain. All of our brains, as we know, are really complex and fascinating parts of the human body. For the purposes of today, we're going to focus on the 4 lobes that are found on each side of the brain. Forming part of the cerebrum, lobes were originally purely anatomical classifications, but we now know through research that they're related to different brain functions. As you can see from the slide, the 4 lobes are frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. And to give you a little bit more information about what each of these do, in terms of our thinking, the temporal, just a second, the frontal lobe plays a key role in future planning. So it helps us to manage ourselves, to manage our emotions, to manage our thinking, to manage our decision making. The parietal lobe processes sensory information that we receive from the outside, relating to things that we touch, the experiences when we taste, and the temperature. So when we feel cold, hot, or more accurately, a lack of heat, that's the lobe that's at play. And then our temporal lobe focuses on the auditory stimulus, so the things that we're hearing. So your temporal lobe is being hopefully stimulated positively by listening to me, and also helping you to commit to memory and generating the emotions, whatever they might be, that you feel about the presentation that I'm giving. So, as we know, in order for us amazing human beings to work to our maximum potential, all of the brain has to work together. All right? But we know, in terms of what we're trying to focus on in this webinar, that the most common part of the brain used to stimulate creative and strategic thinking is that frontal lobe, the bit at the front. All right? So if we're preparing ourselves to use our brain, to use the frontal lobe, then it kind of makes sense that we should try to look after it, and we should try to educate it and train it so that it works effectively when we want to. So in the same way that we need to think about our physical health when we make that crazy decision to train for and run a marathon, then we know that unless we're very lucky, for most of us, in order to be able to be successful achieving that marathon, we need to train for it. And actually, the same sort of thinking applies when we're trying to use our brain. So the more that we work on developing our brain and treating our brain well, the easier it will be. So there are a number of exercises that we can do to train our brain. All right. So first of these is quite simple. We can do some of these. We can take our time and plan for. Some of them you can just, when you're working or watching television or after your dinner, you can just stop for a few moments and just spend a little time focusing on them. So the first of these, just quite simply, put on your rose-coloured glasses. And for those not familiar with that phrase, that just means when we have our rose-coloured glasses on, it means we're seeing things positively. We're seeing things in their best light. So put your rose-coloured glasses on and think about a positive story. Think about something that you would like to go well, that goes well. Visualize it, see it, feel it, think about what's working. All right, and you are, in doing this, you are stimulating your frontal lobe and preparing yourself to think creatively and strategically. Make sure it's sometimes a bit more difficult, easier said than done, but follow a sleep routine. Try to get that healthy 8 hours. Put your screens away at least an hour before you start. All of those kind of things. The better rested we are, and it kind of goes without saying that helps us to our brain to work as we would like it to. Deny the drama. The drama knocks the frontal lobe off its game. So press the pause button, remove yourself from the drama, try and see see things in a different way. So thinking about the politics of the office, try your best to resist, particularly if you know you need to think strategically and creatively. Physical contact, moving your body. All right, these can all stimulate parts of the frontal lobe. Offer and receive physical contact. Now, I know that some of us will be naturally touchy-feely than others, and it has to be done obviously in an appropriate way, but just those human connections can help stimulate the brain. Create acronyms on our cartoons to remember things. Help develop the memory function and use the visual power of a cartoon to help stimulate the frontal member of your brain. Play, have fun. Playing games stimulates our creativity. Do some good things, be of service and volunteer. All right, helps us to stimulate the frontal lobe. And then things like, doesn't have to be learning to juggle, but learning a new skill or something like that can all help to train our brain. So in the same way, if we want to power lift 100 kilograms, we have to work at it. If we want to be really effective in using our frontal lobe to help with our creative and strategic thinking, then training at it and working at it could be helpful. So just for a moment, I want us, as the slides transition, to put on our rose-coloured glasses. So I'm going to give you the chance in a webinar to sit back, relax, close your eyes for a minute or so, and think about something positive that's coming your way. Think about something that you need to achieve at work in the near future. Imagine it all goes perfectly. All your planning comes easily, the execution is seamless, and everyone you need to influence does you what you want. Amazing, eh? Spend 30 seconds, a minute, just thinking on that. You've just stimulated your frontal lobe. Okay, so we're now in a better position. All right, we may need to develop ourselves further and keep working at this, but we're already tapping into the parts of our brain where we know it will be helpful when it comes to thinking strategically. So for the next few slides, we're just going to bring to life all things strategy for you. So we'll define strategy. We'll talk about what we mean when we're thinking about the key elements of strategy. We'll translate that into what do we mean when we're talking specifically about strategic thinking, how we turn strategic thinking into reality, in some form of strategy. Let's make that clear link between learning and strategic thinking, and then remind ourselves or provide you with a strategic planning process that hopefully you can take from this webinar and start transferring the learning and implementing into your real world. So firstly, just to define what we mean when we're talking about strategy, and of course, if you Google the word strategy or look at it in the dictionary, you'll see any number of different definitions, but for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to define it as per the slide. Strategy is a set of coordinated, created, and sustainable actions. It's a plan. It's a plan that we're going to deliver. It's a plan that's going to take us towards some form of measurable success. It's designed to overcome one or more core challenges that will ultimately create value. Now, when we're talking about organizational and business strategy, that value is often aligned to the bottom line, our profitability, but not always. It could be about changing behavior, providing a benefit to our customers, to the outside world, or whatever it might be. But whatever our strategy is, it must be aligned to creating some value at the end of it. Where organizations and individuals, when they're talking about strategy, often make mistakes is they define it to one single element. It's just about making more money. All right. Or they create so many goals that the communication of that strategy and that delivery of that strategy and the ability to measure whether it's been successful or not becomes so difficult that the strategy fails. All right. It's not just about a race to be the best. All right. It's a race to get you as an individual, a team, a department, or an organization to achieve whatever it is you need to do to add value. It's not necessarily about being the best in your industry or best in field, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be perfect. You will have heard, many of you, I'm sure, of the 80-20 rule. All right, so if we've got 80% there, we can generally manage without the 20% being fully defined, without our I's being dotted or our T's being crossed or the cake being iced. And it's not doing things that don't create value. All right, so doing things just for doing things' sake. It has to, that's the fundamental message of strategy. It has to be aligned back to what we're trying to do to achieve value. Okay, so in simple terms, if we're thinking about what are the key elements of strategy then, yeah, we're also thinking of, it's about identifying the core challenges. It's about creating coordinated, creative and sustainable actions that will lead us towards the delivery of that strategy. And it's about absolutely making sure that we are creating value for either ourselves, for the organisation, for the team, or what it might be. So I'll just press the pause button again, just for a second there, because I want you to be thinking about how you're going to use the information that I'm giving and what your foundations are like to help you to deliver success in this particular area. So a couple of reflections for you. Think of a time when you've had amazing success, ideally in the workplace, because this is focusing in your professional life. But if not, it can be any other aspect of your life. Reflect on the actions that underpin that success. What type of things were you putting in place? How did it feel? What did you see? And then as an individual, reflect on what's happening for you right now. Do you feel that you are currently creating value in your day-to-day activities? Do the outcomes outweigh the efforts? Is it worth it? Is it aligned to what you are trying to do, or your team is trying to do, or your organisation is trying to do to add value? Do you feel that you have a sense of purpose? Is the work you're doing helping you to move towards that higher goal, helping the business to achieve its strategic aims and to add value? If the answers to any of those questions are negative, or perhaps not as positive as they might be, then take some time at the end of this session, or whenever you get a moment over the weekend or into next week, to reflect on what you might be able to do to step up, to improve your effectiveness in these areas. Speak to us at IMechE if you need to. Let's see if we can help you as well. Okay, so just let's put some meat on the bones of what we mean when we're thinking about strategic thinking. All right, so again, we're using our brain, we're using our mind, and we're recognizing the three processing systems that help us to formulate an effective strategy that creates value. So we have perception, our ability to transform the information received through the senses into impressions, so how we see the world. And remember, in terms of relationships, stakeholder management of the people who might need to help you to deliver your strategy, it's possible that their perception is different to yours. So you also have to invest time in developing your relationships so that you understand where they're coming from, so you can empathize. The other part of this is intuition. This allows us to make judgments and decisions automatically. Doesn't mean we're always right, but we do this many times every day. Sometimes we're conscious of it. Sometimes it's just we do this on autopilot. We make a decision to go into the kitchen and have a cup of coffee, or we make a decision to approach a certain task at work, whatever it might be. And then working with the final element, our reasoning, this allows us to consciously assess and analyze issues to arrive at a conclusion. So putting those three things together and using them all effectively and developing ourselves and working at them can help us to position ourselves to be more effective with our strategic thinking. So again, there are a number of exercises that we can do. Some take a little bit more time than others, but some we can just do in the way that we do physical exercises really quickly while sitting at a desk sometimes. Some of these we can do really quickly. So to help train our brain around perception, try hidden picture games. For those of you that are familiar with the Where Wally, this is where you will find a character called Wally, and he was hidden in a very detailed picture, and we have to use our brain to find him out. Practice, if this is your thing, practice picture drawing. Find a partially completed picture and finish it off. You're stimulating your perception. Complete dot-to-dot worksheets or puzzles. For intuition, we'll have a look at this in a little bit, but work hard on being present in the moment. So all of your senses and all of your attention is spent on the area that you're trying to focus on in terms of thinking strategically or thinking creatively. And then in reasoning, we do this, we're probably doing a lot of this anyway. So seek out, and I absolutely understand that some of us are more naturally creative than others, but find a way to move from where you are to practice your creative skills by having a go at creative hobby. Doesn't matter if you're the worst artist in the world, give it a go. Doesn't matter if you can't write for toffee. Just get your pen out or your keyboard pad out and give it a go. I know at the moment for some of us, it's difficult to socialise. But in more easier times and using the technology that's available to us, the socialising that we can do can help us train their brain. And also be aware and think about how often you ask questions, how curious you are. Sometimes reflect those of you that have children or maybe have nieces and nephews or grandchildren. Think about the way that children ask questions about everything, their natural curiosity. Some of us lose as we get older. All right. Well, practice asking questions, being curious, and you're stimulating and improving your brain to be able to deliver the strategic and creative thinking that you want to. So again, I'm going to ask you to try a quick exercise. All right, we're going to do a little bit of mindfulness. For those of you that are not familiar with mindfulness and would like to know more, then again, contact us afterwards, or simply look it up on the internet afterwards. And it's all about helping us to make the most of ourselves, to make the most of the moment, to stimulate our creative thinking, etc., etc., etc. And there are all sorts of different exercises out there, but we're just going to do a quick one that can help us get better at being present. So therefore, being ready to attack the task ahead of us, the strategic thinking or the creative thinking that we want to do. All right. So I'm not going to ask you to step away from technology because you need to listen to me. All right. And you need to see your technology. All right. But one of the things that we know that can help us be present is to remove ourselves from technology, to just be with us for a while. All right. But having said that, I just want you to have a go at this. So open your minds. If this isn't something that sounds within your comfort zone, give it a go anyway. Again, another chance in a lunchtime webinar or a Friday webinar, depending on what time of day it is where you are, to relax and to close your eyes. I want you to focus on your breathing. Slowly in, slowly out. And then I want you to focus on the very top of your head. Check in with that part of your anatomy. Get a sense of what's going on up there. And then very slowly, while keeping your breathing, transfers, focus on your shoulders, your chest, and slowly move down through your body until you get to the tips of your toes. For many of us who've not done this before, this may sound strange, okay? But believe me, if you notice your thoughts and you practice exercises like this, then you will be increasing your ability to be present and therefore positioned, to be successful in your strategic thinking. And also, as it says, the last point, keep ourselves well fueled. So actually, that's about diet as well as water. So drinking water can help us to do that. Right. So again, if you've had a go at that exercise, you should now have increased your ability to be present and to focus on the next few slides. So we're going to have a moment to think about the thinking process. The thinking process that you do and the relationship that you need to have with other people. So it often starts with really understanding the situation or really understanding the other person, walking a mile in their shoes. So we need to empathize. All right. So listen to understand. Develop the relationships that you need to have so you understand where they're coming from, what their perception is, etc., etc. And then define what the challenge is or the opportunity is that you've got in face of you, the model that you want to build, the process that you want to change, the organizational change that you want to implement, whatever it might be. And then either on your own or with others, ideate. So think about the ways in which you can achieve, you can achieve the delivery of these goals or these ideas that you've come up with. And then depending on what it is that you're doing, create a prototype, all right? Something that you can use to help with the last part, which is the test. And then often we have to keep going around that thinking process before we get to our final solution. But following those stages and being aware of what's going on and staying in the moment can really help us to clarify our thinking and make sure it does what we want it to do, which is to help us define a strategy or solve a problem or whatever it might be. And you can see from the case study how some of these thinking around strategic thinking is turned into strategy. So you can see that if we think about Amazon, we park our feelings about Amazon as an organization, good or bad for now, because it's not about that. It's just about the way that they go about and the exercises that they do at their board level to form the narrative, to make sure that they create an environment from which thinking is appreciated, valued, and space is given for them to be successful. So they welcome it, and the language that they use around it that enables them to be successful, enables them to deliver their strategy or elements of their strategy as they need to. So we know that there is an opportunity, as well as developing the strategy, there is an opportunity to learn. All right. So there is a clear link between strategic thinking and learning. All right. The really good strategic thinkers are able to identify core challenges for them to deliver. They identify either on their own or with support from a network solutions to help achieve these core challenges. They know the value of testing and amending in order to find something that's good enough to get them where they want to and to create that value. They know when to give up. They know when to implement, but they know sometimes when actually we need to go somewhere else. And they also recognize that it's not the learning is not just about that specific activity. It's also about the wider learning that you can bring to the organization and the opportunities and responsibilities that we have to do that. So lessons learned exercise and sharing that learning and building those relationships and communicating can be really helpful. And just to kind of remind ourselves of that link between strategic thinking and learning, we see here a copy of the learning cycle, Kolb's learning cycle. And Kolb tells us in really simple terms, in the time that we've got available today, that when we're learning, we have an experience. All right. So let's assume that we've never seen a bicycle before, but suddenly we've come across one in the street. All right. And it just so happens that somebody down the road is cycling away on another bicycle. So we've got some sense of what you're supposed to do with this thing. So we get on it, we sit on it, we start feeling what works in terms of our balance. We press the pedals forward, we maybe go a few revolutions of the wheels, and then we fall off. All right, and then what happens is we kind of think, oh, why did that fall off? How did that feel for me? It was quite exciting. I want to do that again, but I think I was doing some elements of it wrong. So we develop some of ideas. We think about our balance. We think about the technique that we need to do. And then we have another go and we put it into practice and we have another experience. And and that's basically the learning cycle. It's what we do. It's what we do every day, many times a day. Sometimes we're conscious of it, sometimes we're not. But if we look back in terms of the strategic planning process, you can see the alignments. So assessing the situation, identifying the core challenges, solving those core challenges, working hard to reduce the uncertainty, and managing the execution. The added bit that we have to deal with, as we know in organisations, is that we're dealing with people and we're dealing with different perceptions and different agendas and different priorities. So as well as going through that process, we also need to factor in and manage what's called the invisible hand, our corporate culture. But the process itself is very clearly aligned to the learning cycle that we go through every day. So again, just a moment to take a couple of reflections. If you are going to be delivering some of these things and you want to be effective and you want to make sure you're adding value, it might make sense to ensure that you are really clear on your organization's vision, mission, and values. And therefore do some thinking, if you're going to, some strategic thinking, if you like, some creative, if you like, around what you're going to do to make these work for you, how the work you do can be aligned to these. And also, as we do, measure the risks, identify the risks, think about the barriers that you have to achieving these things and how you might mitigate them or remove them, and think about the opportunities that you have and how and where you need to build relationships to help manage that invisible hand. Okay, so that's strategic thinking. So in the time that we've got left, we're just going to bring to life a little bit more about creative thinking. And actually, to be really successful, you need to be able to tap into both. Some of us are naturally more strategic than creative, and some of us the other way around. So whichever we are, we should look to build on our strengths, but also work on the other part of our brain, or that part of our brain that stimulates this kind of thinking. So define what creativity is. Let's specifically think about what creative thinking is. Let's identify some of these barriers that stop us being successful in our creative thoughts. And then just at the end, before the Q&A, I'm going to introduce you to 2 or 3 specific tools and techniques that you can do to work with your creative thinking. So in terms of a definition of creativity, again, you will find many, but for the purposes of this webinar, the use of imagination or original ideas to create something, our ability to utilize and make use of our inventiveness. So specifically, what is creative thinking? It's the ability to kind of challenge ourselves, to make use of all the different aspects of our mind, to use all of the things that are going on around us and all the relationships that we have, to be able to consider something in a new way. And remember, not all people find that easy. Sometimes people are very rigid in their thinking, and getting them to think creatively or think about things in a different way can be a challenge, and they have to work on it, and we all have to work on it to get better at it and to be more successful in it. So think about how you approach a problem. The resolution to conflict between employees. All right, what you've tried before, if you're a manager of people, or perhaps there's a couple of people on your team who regularly fall out, and actually you're only having limited success. So rather than trying the same actions again, think creatively and do something different. All right. So one of the things that lots of organizations really want, and I work with lots of different organizations, they want creative thinkers. They want people who come into their organizations or come into their project and look at things and see things in a different way. They don't want more of the same. They want to build on their successes and their current thinking, but if they're really going to find that competitive edge or their USP, unique selling point, then creative thinking is a really powerful skill to develop. So just to recognize a couple of the barriers. So again, there are many barriers, and you will probably have some barriers of your own. All right, so a lack of direction. All right, and not having that clear strategy. So what are we supposed to think creatively about? There's no foundation to it. There's nothing to hang our hat on. That fear of failure. All right. And this is about mindset. Many of these are about mindset. It's changing from fixed mindset to a growth mindset, and changing the way you think about failure to recognize it as a growth opportunity, a genuine learning opportunity. In terms of fear of criticism, be kind to yourself. Be yourself biggest supporter, be your biggest advocate. If you believe in your site or your idea, it's worthy of further exploration. If you take it through the thinking process or the learning cycle and recognize at some point down the line that you need to do something different or abandon that, fine. But don't give up just because you get criticism at the outset. We often look for constancy. Do things as we've always done it, because we get some success from that, and we get praise and we get rewarded. To break down that, to try something else, is really helpful. Passive versus protective thinking. All right, so actually stimulate your ideas. Actually be conscious of what's going on for you, and try to look at things in a different way, and try to see a different solution to one that you've already taken, even if it has been successful. And then sometimes when we over-rationalize and over justify, we talk ourselves out of doing something. As someone much better than me once said, sometimes you've just got to just do it. And again, some ways to stimulate the creative thinking. Step outside of your comfort zone. So perhaps some of you, when I ask you to do that mindfulness exercise, even though you're wherever you are, we're online, with cameras are on or anything like that, may have felt outside your comfort zone. Right? I hope you gave it a go anyway. I hope you stepped outside your comfort zone. I do this one. Write a 500-word article on no topic. Just get your pen or your keyboard out and start writing. See where it takes you. It's stimulating the creative thought. Where we can, when we can again, go and see a film on a big screen. Particularly one of those where the IMechE ones, where all the senses can be stimulated. They're stimulating your senses and preparing you to be able to think creatively. Meet new people again when we can. Talk to new people. Get different perspectives. Work hard at the relationship that you have to build with somebody at the outset. It stimulates the mind. It helps with creative thinking. We've talked already about healthy body. Healthy body, healthy mind. And then again, this mindset, a mindset thing. So try for yourself individually, but also collectively as an organization in your team. Try to change your thinking around ideas and how they land. But no idea is a bad idea because it can lead us to something. So I'm not going to ask you to do this one now, but here's an example of the complete picture. Basically, you could get your partner or a colleague or one of your children to draw a part of a picture, and then you just complete it. And you're stimulating your mind, stimulating your ability to think creatively. So before we wrap up, and some of these you will be familiar with, I know, here are some tools that you can potentially use. There are many others. So again, talking to us after this might be helpful, or doing some research on your own. So the first one is mind maps. Maybe many of you already use a mind map already. So we're stimulating our creative thinking. We put whatever it is that we want to create in the middle, and we think, let's say, delivery of project X. And then we might say people. And then everything that comes that we need to think about in terms of people. Then another strand might be systems and everything we need to, and then your brain takes you where you need to take you. And before you know it, you've created a mind map, which you can continue to amend that will help you to think creatively and plan towards a strategy that creates and adds value. The second one is the 6 hats, right? Sometimes in some organizations, in some things, they actually physically use the hats. But it's really about thinking about the types of conversation you should have whilst you're wearing a particular or you're sitting under the banner of a hat if you haven't physically got that. If you haven't physically got the hat. So when we're thinking about a problem or something, a solution to find, when we're wearing the blue hat, we only think positive. We only think about the big picture, the big goals. What's the objective? Who's going to facilitate, etc., etc. When we wear the white hat, we focus purely on facts and information. What information do we currently have? What information do we need? What physical locations will we need, etc. When we wear the red hat, we give people a chance to talk about intuition, feelings, and emotions. What are their immediate reactions? What are their initial ideas? At this stage, you're avoiding analysis. It's just about creative thinking. When you wear the black hat, that's the opportunity to be a bit critical. All right, to make some critical judgment, to try to draw back and find a compromise behind this. red hat, creative thinking, and the black hat. And then the yellow hat is about exploring and identifying the benefits of the solution or the situation that you're trying to deliver against. And then finally, the green hat is where we go, okay, we've got something to work with. What new ideas have we got? What new thoughts have we got? So we use the hats to manage the conversations. And then we've got another one. This one's called HURSON. And HURSON is about just a really simple way of framing the conversation. So we ask what's going on. We ask what is success. We ask what is the question. We generate answers. We forward the solution, and we align resources. And then the last one that we can use, or the last one for today, but remember there are many is this one called appreciative inquiry. And this is about creating a platform for creative thinking that focuses on existing strengths and positives rather than the pitfalls and the hurdles that often derail our creative thinking. So explore it through 5 phases. Our definition phase. What is the focus of our inquiry? The discovery phase. What will give life to it? What will be the best of it? What are our opportunities? Then we invite people to dream. What would this be in a perfect world? We get people to think big, think amazing, to be amazing. And it's stimulating. You'll see when this happens, whether you do it yourself or you do it as a group, how these thoughts and these ideas stimulate the creative thought in others. You suddenly find yourself in a really accelerated opportunity to think creatively. And then we design. What's the ideal? What does that look like and feel like? And then finally, we commit it to some kind of action. What are our opportunities? How will we change the world? So there's just a few for you. There are many more. At this point, I'm going to kind of wrap up my presentation phase of the webinar. Thank you for staying with me. I've seen some issues about sound. I've had some issues of sound as well, but we'll take some time to try to address some of the questions that we can. So, Rob, do you want to set that up?
Hi, Phil. Can you hear me? Hi, Phil.
Yes, I can hear you.
Me? Excellent. And we got a few
questions.
Yes,
I can hear you.
Yeah, good. Excellent. We've got a few questions. The first is a couple of questions on the same topic, really. They are, is there a way to turn your work mode off when you go back home at the end of the day? And the second one related to that is work mode on off. I would also like to know tips for that one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question and has never been more relevant, as many of us are working remotely, either full-time or as part of a hybrid solution where we spend part of our time at home and part of our time in the office. I can't remember the exact word for it, but the French have a term where they recognise that the value of doing something between the end of work, the end of home, so whatever it might be, going to the gym, going to the art gallery, having a drink with friends. It's just that transition between work and home. So therefore, you're transitioning the brain. Some people even use the commute to do that. But I would also say, just in terms of the technology, it's great that we can be connected 24/7 now, but we should absolutely make a period to say, I'm going to shut off my email, shut off my phone. I'm going to work with my team to agree principles that we can do that. To have this time where I transition between work on and work off, because you need to maximize your opportunity at home and looking after yourself and your mind and your body in order to be effective in the workplace. If that doesn't work as well as you might, over a period of time, there will be consequences. Is there another question?
Yes. A couple here. Can you define the difference between an action plan that is strategic and an action plan that is tactical?
All right, so action plan that's strategic versus an action plan that's tactical. All right, so I would say if we're thinking about strategic, we're thinking about our goals, our big primary goals, that we want to open up a new market in Southeast Asia. Okay? Whereas the action plan that's tactical is more the specific actions that we would want to put in place in order for us to open that market. So one is the strategic goal, and then the other, either for the business or for the department or for the team or for the individual, would be the specific actions that either the business needs to do, team needs to do, or individuals need to do to help that strategic goal to be achieved. And what's really critical is making sure that people have an understanding of the alignment between the two, so that they know how they make a difference, how they make a contribution. Because if they have that, they're engaged with a sense of purpose, and you're positioning the whole business to be much, or the whole team, or the whole project, whatever it might be, to be more successful in delivering the overall goal. Do we have time for another one, Rob?
Yeah, there's one for them. What time were you? Yes, we do. This is sort of encompassed in about half a dozen questions, really. It's do you have any tips of encouraging creative thinking within teams? So individually, you can put a hat on, that sort of thing, and sometimes that doesn't work within a team environment. As I said, any tips to how that would work? And also within that team, with people working at home, how is there any tips on how to get a creative team environment within that sphere?
Yeah. So firstly, I would say with a bit of thought, a bit of creativity, all of the techniques that I went through in the presentation can work in a team environment and even virtually. There is technology out there where you can create online mind maps. So you can all be sitting in a virtual meeting and contributing to a mind map from wherever you might be in the world. If you're in the office and you're in a formal team meeting, sometimes when we're thinking about team engagement, creating a bit of fun can stimulate creativity. And actually, the thing with the hats can work quite nicely because it's a bit of a laugh. For some people, it's out of their comfort zone, but it's a good way of doing that and stimulating some thought. And the same with the appreciative inquiry one. Now, I've seen this one in action virtually and when people are in the same room. And it's not just about the process going through the different phases. It's about the energy that's created and how people draw upon one another's energy and how that stimulates thought. And it almost becomes quite competitive in case of who can come up with the most outlandish idea. And in those ideas, perhaps there are a number of them that you will never use, but it's amazing how many times the golden nugget comes from that. Now, clearly, that's more difficult if you're working virtually, but it's possible. Think about the platform that you're using. Make sure you have your cameras on. Use different whiteboards as well as slides. Get different people participating. Maybe do it at a time of the day where most people are more energized. and we can stimulate some of the most. So it is more difficult, but it's not impossible.
Thank you, Phil. That's excellent. And thank you for all those questions. I'm sorry we hadn't got time to answer them all. There's a couple more slides I want to quickly go through and show you. Firstly, as you'll see in the chat box, my colleague Kirsty has put the details in there. Here are some of the up-and-coming courses that would support and follow on from this webinar. The First Line Management Skills Masterclass, Leadership Practice and Mentoring Skills. The details are on the screen, and also there's information in the chat box regarding that. And finally, those of you who are engineers and or looking to become professionally registered engineers, here's some information regarding some of the help that we can give towards that. There's some contact details on the screen there, and I'll leave that on there for a few minutes as you disappear. Again, thank you all for attending. We've had, I think, somewhere in the region of 600-700 people today. Excellent attendance, excellent questions, and thank you very much. And thank you, Phil.